On July 22nd, 1923, one of the greatest pitchers that's often forgot about, Walter Johnson, becomes the first pitcher to ever strike out 3,000 batters. And that's not all he did, as he continued his success throughout his career, putting up numbers that many thought were impossible in the modern era. Here's the story behind Walter Johnson today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide to a deep dive into sports history every day. And today's trivia question to listen out for is, what record does Walter Johnson still hold in Major League Baseball after almost 100 years since he last played? Now, Walter Johnson was born in Kansas in 1887 to a big farm family, and he was the second of 6 kids. But when he became a teenager, his family moved from Kansas to California in search of a better life. And this is where Walter really made a name for himself in baseball, as with his high school team, he one time struck out 27 batters in a 15-inning game. And he continued the success when he joined the Idaho State League, where he worked for a telephone company and played for their team. And he was spotted by a Washington Senators scout. And in 1907, he finally signed with the Washington Senators at the age of 19. Now, the crazy thing is, if you ever watched Walter Johnson pitch, he has the most effortless pitching motion, very different than one you would see today. His style of pitching is mainly with his elastic arm and doesn't use a whole lot of his lower body. Just takes an easy step and has his arm do about a 3/4 throw with not a whole lot of elbow involved. And even with this unique, unorthodox style of throwing, as it would be considered today, it's estimated he threw the ball anywhere between 91 and 95 miles an hour at the time, which at the time, they didn't have radar guns to really tell the exact time, but they would use estimates based on how long the ball took to leave his hand to the catcher's mitt. Now, the reason why that is significant is because at the time, pitchers were pitching closer to 80 miles an hour rather than in the 90s, what we're used to today. We had just come into the modern era of pitching, which has changed a lot, and his fastball was very overwhelming. As Ty Cobb once said, Walter Johnson was the most threatening sight he had ever saw on the ball field, and it was the most powerful arm that had ever been turned loose in a ballpark. Now, one thing he did really well, now is similar to a previous episode we did on Nolan Ryan, was he pitched well despite his team not being that great, which is an issue that Nolan Ryan also had. And we also talked about the Washington Senators in a previous episode where they bounced around and eventually ended up becoming the Atlanta Braves. Despite this challenge with the team, he had 12 seasons where he won over 20 games, including 10 he did in a row. And twice he topped 30 wins in 1912 and 1913, where he had an earned run average of 1.4 in 1913, which is the 4th lowest ever recorded at the time, and is still today the 6th lowest ERA for a season. In 1913, he won 36 games, which was equivalent to 40% of the total wins for the team. But after pitching for over 17 years in the major leagues, the Washington Senators actually put everything together and made it to the World Series in 1924, allowing him the chance to pitch to win a championship. But he didn't have success as he lost those first 2 games. And in the deciding Game 7, he came back to pitch in relief, pitching 4 scoreless innings in a game that went to extra innings, giving Washington and Johnson their first World Series title. Now, what set Walter Johnson apart from other pitchers was his strikeout ability. Yes, he had a strong arm, which allowed him the chance to strike out even more hitters. And the most strikeouts he ever had in a season was 313 strikeouts. And he averaged over 167 strikeouts his entire career. And he finished his career with 3,508 strikeouts, a record that stood until 1973, when it was passed by Nolan Ryan. He has since been passed by 7 other players, all of which are in the Hall of Fame except for Roger Clemens, but he still sits at number 9 all-time on the strikeout list. And he joined Cy Young as becoming the only pitchers to ever win more than 400 games, as he finished his career with 417 wins, behind Cy Young's 551. And the current leader in Major League Baseball for wins is Justin Verlander at 260. And he finished his career with 110 shutouts, which means you completed the entire game and did not give up a single run. A record that he still holds to this day, and one that will likely never be broken as baseball has changed, as pitchers pitch much less complete games. So when his career was finished, he had a career ERA of 2.17, was a 2-time MVP, won the pitching triple crown 3 times, leading in wins, ERA, and strikeouts, led the American League in strikeouts for 12 seasons, and despite having 110 career shutouts, only pitched 1 no-hitter in his life on July 1st, 1920. But he was not done when he retired in 1927. After 21 years of playing baseball, he moved right into managing the Washington Senators and would move on to manage the Cleveland Indians for a couple years as well, having a winning percentage as a manager of .550. And he was one of the original Hall of Fame members in the inaugural class, along with Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and he deserved to be the best pitcher. Now, he's often forgot about in pitching lore, as Cy Young has the award named after him for the best pitcher in the league. And Walter Jones, most of his records have been broken and only has that 1 championship. So his legacy isn't as strong. But when you dive into who he was as a player, a guy that pitched as often as he could with little to no injuries, and is still on the top list for baseball players of all time. But we often forget about him when listing the best pitchers that ever lived. But even more so, he was a great sportsman and even a friendlier friend, as he would give up hits to his friends regularly to allow them to enjoy the game as well. And that's a little bit about Walter Johnson today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a topic you would like us to cover, please leave us a review wherever you're listening, or go to dailysportshistory.com, leave us a voicemail or a message there, what sport or event you want us to cover, and come back tomorrow for more Daily Sports History. And did you catch the answer to today's trivia question? What record does Walter Jones still hold to this day? And the answer is complete game shutouts with 110, a record that will probably never be broken.